Hey guys, Chris here, back with you once again and out of left field with my good friend Graham McGowan. What's going on, Graham?
Another day, man. Glad it's Friday. I'm heading out on vacation for a couple of days, traveling to see the family. It's my dad's 70th birthday coming up, so we're heading up there to see him. And also would have been my stepdad, and then my father's birthday would have been today, would have been the ripe old age of 64.
All right, so got a little travel going on in front of you?
A little bit.
Are you guys driving up there, or how are you guys going to get up there?
No, we're flying. So early morning flight. We got to be up around 4, fly out about 7:30. So shouldn't be bad. But the good thing is we got some baseball to talk about.
We do.
Right after the All-Star break, we're rolling back in. And I told you I was thinking of throwing a curveball in the middle of the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do it right now. Before we even get into what the show is about, I assume that a good chunk of our listeners listen to Mike and Mike in the morning. I do it, tend to do it quite a bit. I hear him going to work every morning. I tweet him. You guys can also tweet us at OOLeftField. You can email us, ooleftfield@gmail.com, or find us on Facebook. We have a page on there. It's Out of Left Field, easy search. So the other day, it was this past Tuesday, Buster Olney was co-hosting with Mike Greenberg. And he brought up the idea of, basically Greeny stole it from one of the NFL writers, of 9 ways to improve baseball. Not baseball's dying and how do we fix it, but 9 ways to improve it. So there was a point that I mentioned last show about how to make the All-Star game better, and you had mentioned a very similar point to me recently about how to make the season better. And I was a little bit leery of it at first. So I sent it out about 6:15 a.m. Why don't we require relief pitchers to face at least 2 batters unless it is the final out? And wouldn't you know it, Buster Olney and Mike Greenberg loved the idea that the 2 guys from Out of Left Field came up with, and presented that idea to the Commissioner of Baseball, Rob Manfred, yesterday, who, as you know, Chris, said that he had been, and Major League Baseball as a whole, had been widely considering already trying to find a change that would work for this. So, Chris Ferry, since you are the original creator of this idea between you and I am not going to take full credit for it. Let's hear it, man.
Actually, before I get started on talking about how awesome that is, I do have to sort of admit something. I didn't come up with that idea, believe it or not. Credit for that idea actually goes to a really good friend of mine named Jason Whitesett. He is a professor of English and humanities and lover of baseball who lives here in Arizona. And when you and I were getting ready to do the show about ways we could improve baseball as a whole, and talking about different rule changes and stuff like that, he actually came up with that idea. And I was also wary of it at first. I thought, I don't like it. But the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about how it could affect how bullpen strategies are used, both in the ridiculous designated hitter American League and in the actual baseball of the National League, the more I warmed to the idea. And by the time I introduced that idea on Out of Left Field, I'd become a pretty strong proponent of it. And I think that it's a good enough idea, not only to be presented to the Commissioner of Baseball, which, I mean, I can't tell you how awesome it is that an idea from a little grassroots podcast like ours gets, not only some really good press from Buster Olney of all people, or Mike Greenberg, but actually gets presented to the Commissioner of Baseball, who says, hey, we've actually been looking for something like that.
And guys, we are going to try and get Buster on. We have made a request of ESPN to have him on the show, so hopefully we'll have him on for you here in the next couple of weeks. What I think kind of surprised me is they didn't take it just in the context of how you and I have discussed it, right? It was just in general, in what ways can you try and fix the problem of the specialist idea? And I have no problem with there being a specialist, but what Rob Manfred's big point is that you have so many of these guys with fresh arms. Let's look, for example, at the Yankees, where you have Dellin Betances, you have Andrew Miller, and you have Aroldis Chapman. And we'll get into them a little bit later coming up in the show, because it's a good possibility that two of those three might not be wearing pinstripes very much longer. But you have guys that are throwing high 90s, fresh arms every inning, and the offense really slows down. But then on top of that, with guys like Bruce Bochy and Joe Madden, who love to really use the pitcher's batter to batter, you get 2.5 minutes roughly. I think it's 2:25 for a regional game and 2 minutes and 45 seconds for a nationally televised game to warm up in between innings when the clock rolls in the stadium. So if you think about it, you're looking at almost 5 minutes between each pitcher plus the amount of pitches they throw to that batter. That's what's causing the game to drag on, not fixing the intentional walk and removing that from the game as we discussed in our first show. But it's things like this where there's constantly an influx of players and pitchers, and they're constantly changing. There were some guys that had the idea of maybe limiting the number of substitutes you can have in a game, which to me is an absolutely – I'm sorry, to me it was a ludicrous idea, because if we get a game like what we saw Wednesday, which you and I were both talking back and forth during and prepping for the show between the Red Sox and the Giants, is Matt Cain didn't even get out of the bottom of the third. Drew Pomeranz, the new starter for the Red Sox, couldn't make it out of the top of the fourth because of command issues. When all of a sudden this 8-0 lead blew up, and it was almost a tie game. So how are you going to try and limit the number of subs when you may have to pull your starter in the fourth or fifth inning, or sometimes even sooner? So I didn't like that part of it. But, man, I still liked your idea, because my initial argument to it was that it's part of the game. Strategy is part of the game. You're taking it away from the manager by saying, well, he has to face two players. But now all of a sudden, let's say that we've got, I don't know, Aroldis Chapman for, say he goes to the Nationals, which is a possibility, and they're playing the Cubs. Well, it's going to start determining, and it's going to start changing the way I think we see lineups written. We already know that Joe Madden likes to bat his pitchers eighth to have a 9 and a 1 be your regular hitters for a double leadoff kind of scenario. But now let's say you have Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo batting back-to-back, and that's your first two hitters and out of the three for the next inning. Now you have to decide, who am I going to give the advantage to on the lefty-righty matchup or righty-lefty matchup? So it actually kind of grows the requirement and the need for strategy, because you have to figure out what's your poison going to be.
Yeah, and that was really, I think, the basis of Jason's argument when he first brought it up to me, is because I also first said, nah, it takes the strategy out of the game. It takes away the ability to have a specialist come in, face a big hitter in a situation where that hitter might be dangerous for you. Late in the game, you got a left-handed hitter like David Ortiz coming to the plate. You need a left-handed specialist if you got runners on the bases and the game is close. And then the more I looked at it, the more I thought, yeah, but, the guys who hit after David Ortiz, there's a couple right-handed hitters who hit after David Ortiz who are strong hitters too. And if you're telling a pitcher he has to face two guys, well, now you're not doing anything but making the pitchers have to be better, right? Because now your left-handed specialists, guys like Javi Lopez, are going to have to come in and possibly face right-handed hitters and be in a situation where Now they have to learn how to pitch to the other side of the plate. They have to learn how to work the inside or the outside corner, the outside left-hand corner of that plate that they don't usually work in a typical outing.
And I think it'll force them to learn new pitches too, because things where you're getting movement, things that bite back inside, maybe going from a changeup to adding a circle change or that two-seam fastball, that slider and cutter may be great, but imagine having a pitcher that has 5 or 6 pitches he can throw. And, granted, maybe we see a couple more mound visits, by the catcher, which can be quick, but hey, we're going to change the signs. For this righty, 1's your fastball, 2's your cutter, 3's your slider, and 4 is going to be your straight change. All right, we have your opposite now. 1's still going to be your fastball. We're going to go two-seamer, circle change, and your curveball. I think it really adds to the possibility of strategy both by the catcher, who is the general of that field, and the manager.
Yeah. And one of the things that really kind of made me look at this whole idea is there are guys in the game that you just can't pitch around, whether you have a right-handed specialist or a left-handed specialist. There are guys in the game that you don't pitch around. And those are guys like Ken Griffey Jr. and Mike Piazza, who, by the way, are going to be inducted into the National Baseball Hall of Fame here in a couple days as we move into Hall of Fame weekend following the All-Star break. They're going to become line numbers 311 and 312 in Cooperstown. And to be honest with you, man, I can't think of a couple of hitters who deserve it more. I've said 100 times, I've told you 100 times that Ken Griffey Jr. has possibly the purest swing that I've ever seen in the history of baseball. And Mike Piazza Mike Piazza. What do you say about Mike Piazza? He's a ball player.
And
he's a great ball player.
And I think the awesome thing about this is you have Junior, who was the kid. He was the natural. He was expected to be greatness. And then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum is Mike Piazza, who was a late draft pick by Tommy Lasorda as a family favor pretty much because he was friends with Mike's dad for years. And all of a sudden this kid just starts taking off, having himself a Hall of Fame career. I think it's crazy to think because I believe he's going in as a Met. But I remember him more growing up as a Dodger. So it's I went and saw him because the crazy thing was he actually was a member of the Marlins for a day. When the Dodgers traded him, he went to Miami, Florida at that point, and then he went up to New York. And I can remember as a kid going to watch him play spring training when the Royals were still here. And I was, mind you, 10 or 11, so at that age you always yell the really goofy things. And that was when landlines were really still around because cell phones hadn't really come into big-time existence yet. So I was yelling 10, 10, 220 to him, telling him how to get a 20-minute phone call for only 99 cents. So shout out to 10, 10, 220. Little nostalgia going on here. But,
excellent.
But yeah, he does have Griffey has the most gorgeous swing ever. Every time I ever created a player in a game, it was always Griffey's swing. It was just to watch him stand straight as he did, and then just the way that he kind of that slide step forward, and I mean it was gorgeous. It was
poetry in motion, is what it was.
It was. He has the same. He has that beautiful one-arm backswing, what you see David Ortiz have, but it's not that same kind of real violent jab that it feels like Papi is swinging so hard every time. It was just a fluid motion. It was like it's like watching dance. It was one of the best things I've ever seen. Yeah,
and these two guys, obviously, both of them deserve this enshrinement in Cooperstown. But let's look at Ken Griffey Jr. real quick. Ken Griffey Jr., this is his first year of eligibility. And he just set a record with a 99.32 percentage. He was named on 437 out of 440 ballots by voting members of the BBWAA. And so that ousts Tom Seaver from 1992, who set that mark at 98.84.
And let me just say, it's a travesty that man was not a 100% vote to get into the Hall of Fame. There is no reason why we should not see him be a unanimous choice. No reason at all.
Exactly. I want to know who these three guys were that didn't name Ken Griffey Jr. Maybe three guys who think that someone like Griffey, who didn't win a World Series, doesn't get in his first time around. I think everyone else basically realized that Ken Griffey Jr. is a Hall of Famer.
I think part of the issue with this, and it's something we can get into at another time, and I would love to ask Buster Olney or Tim Kirchin, because Buster was a voting member of the Baseball Writers Association of America for a long time. They are forced into 10 names out of a ballot of 30 or 40. And a lot of guys have admitted that they will not vote for a surefire guy because they know he's going to get in by other votes to get somebody else on there. So I would like to see them open it up, because the problem is you have so many votes that you have so many big names that are coming up, both that have been accused of PEDs, others that haven't, and there's been rumors, and we're seeing guys like Bagwell not get in. Piazza didn't get in first ballot because of back acne. Are we serious? But maybe look at expanding the amount of votes you can give, maybe 12 or 15, because there's going to be a huge influx of surefire, top-notch Hall of Famers who are going to start falling off because you just can't vote for enough people who really deserve enshrinement. So I think the Baseball Writers Association has to find a way to fix that so that the players that truly deserve it get the honor that they've earned on that play on that diamond.
Right. And I mean, you can look at the list of people who were on the ballot, and you can say that there were snubs. But as we've discussed before on the show, the steroid era in baseball really hurt a lot of guys' chances, and I don't know that the turnover in the Baseball Writers Association is going to be fast enough to get any of these guys in. But guys like Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, who missed it by over 100 votes, guys like Fred McGriff, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire.
Well, McGriff never had an issue. He should make it. He's one of those who's been overshadowed by bigger names. Yeah. The one that sticks out to me is Rafael Palmeiro. I think if I'm correct, I believe he is the only major league player in history with over 3,000 hits who is not a member of Cooperstown.
Yeah. Then there's guys like Nomar Garciaparra, who I thought, when I was growing up, I thought that Nomar Garciaparra was a surefire Hall of Famer. The way he played, fantastic middle infielder, and the guy got 8 votes. You know,
but that's where I think sabermetrics is going to help the game. It's why Tim Raines has been looked at as someone who should be in the Hall of Fame, because you can look at the numbers beyond just the bat. Because the problem is that was all eye test stuff. So for Nomar, there has been enough turnover for guys back at that point. I mean, come on. You know, remember Nomar as a Red Sox? He got traded to, I believe, the Dodgers in 2004. He got a ring, and he wasn't even there to enjoy the celebration.
Right.
So, but I think that's where the sabermetrics and the numbers and what he did is great.
Yeah. But I think they did it right. Again, you could ask 100 different people, get 100 different answers. I think Jeff Bagwell probably should have been in this class of inductees, but you know, he missed it by 15 votes. And what are you going to do? He'll probably make it next year, we hope. But definitely kudos to Griffey, who absolutely deserves a unanimous induction. I'd like to find those 3 guys and ask them what their thoughts were not voting for him. And then Piazza made it in his 4th year, 83% of the vote, and it's about time, I think.
I agree. I'm still kind of I'm still, I don't know, I get the whole issue with the steroid era. I'm not a baseball apologist. Well, my issue with the steroid era is the fact that I believe that it was condoned for so long, and guys just did what was condoned. I mean, as I've said before, it's always been said, chicks take the long ball, right?
Yep.
So you tell me why after 94, when baseball viewership was so low and so many people had just written off the game because of the strike, how many viewers came back to watch McGwire and Sosa go at it? It was awesome. And it was like, oh my gosh, the game is growing. We don't want to stop that. So Bud Selig, let it happen. And then to kind of clean up his own legacy, then he wants to clean the game. I'm of the mindset at this point that between 1990, the early 2000s, as I've said before, I think I said it on our first show, which you can, again, guys, you can find all of our broadcasts. You can find it on Twitter. We have a lot of stuff on our Twitter page, so you can find it on @OO Left Field. It's probably going to be easier to find all of our shows on our Facebook page. Just search Out of Left Field. The same picture on our Twitter page is the picture on our Facebook page. It's a picture of me and Chris and our ugly mugs, so you'll see that. And again, you can email us at ooleftfield@gmail.com. Anything after the mid-2000s, if you got busted for PEDs, Ryan Braun, those guys, there should be no reason to put them in the Hall of Fame. No reason at all. But for guys where it was in an era where, I mean, hell, guys used amphetamines in the 70s and 80s. Those are illegal, but they're in the Hall of Fame, and it helped them stay focused. So I get this isn't the same thing. It's a physical, producer. But
here's my question, though.
Let the visitors decide.
What about guys like A-Rod, right, who admits to it in 2009, 2010, but admits that he was doing it back during the steroid era? So he comes out and says, yes, I did it, but he says, no, but I did it in 2001, 2002, 2003. When I was with the Rangers and the Mariners, I wasn't doing it when I was a Yankee, So what about guys like that? Do they go in the Hall of Fame? I mean, does Alex Rodriguez not go in the Hall of Fame because he admitted to steroid use?
Well, when I'm talking about guys that I think, I'm saying the era was between 1990 and the early 2000s, I'm looking at guys that were nearing the end of their careers in this time, not guys that were beginning it. Because
right.
if that's the case, then the era still extends, and it doesn't.
Right.
Here's my thing, and I'm not – Alex Rodriguez was a great player. I'd love to have him on the show and talk to him. But as a person – as a person of the game, I'm not a fan at all. I think it was disgraceful. I think it was completely disgraceful. And I think he had the sheer raw talent to succeed without it. And that's the worst part is now you'll never know what he truly could have been. Everything will always be, well, we don't know how long he was doing it. When did he start? When did he stop? I mean, I think that's the saddest part to me.
Right.
You look at Mark McGwire. Mark McGwire was not the same size he was when he came up in Oakland with the Bash brothers and Jose Canseco as what he was when he got to St. Louis. He was still big, but he wasn't as
he was a pretty big guy in Oakland. Now you have to remember that I was going to watch the A's almost every week in 1994 after the strike. I went to Oakland almost every week because you could get into Oakland A's games. If you bought one adult ticket, a kid ticket was $1 anywhere in the stadium. So we went every single weekend that there was a home game in Oakland. I went and watched the A's play. And I went quite a bit in 89, 90, 91 as well, and watched the A's play because my grandfather is an A's fan. So I watched the Bash brothers. I watched Jose Canseco and Mark McGwire. And I also watched guys like Walt Weiss play baseball, who he may not have been quite as big in Oakland as he was when he got to St. Louis, but in 1994, he was a big dude. Now, in 1986, 87, he was not a big dude. So maybe that tells you how long he was doing it.
But I think what also shows you is he still had sheer raw power in the 80s and in the early 90s. So it's definitely
he was still perennial 30, 35, 40 home run a year guy.
And that's my issue with Barry Bonds is I think there's no question in my mind that I think Balco proved that Barry Bonds took it, even though he never admitted it. But what he could do before he started injecting himself with whatever it was or taking whatever he was still really good. He could still hit the ball. He could run. I know we've talked about it before, and
right.
We're getting way off topic here, and we can come back to this. But, that is, I think, the beauty and the big difference of Cooperstown is it is only Major League Baseball. It's not like basketball where it's all different forms, it's all different countries, it's just the majors. And on one more thing as we get ready to move on, speaking of Hall of Famers, somebody that we discussed a few weeks ago, Ichiro Suzuki is now 4 hits away from hitting 3,000. So he is getting ever so close to one of the huge benchmarks in the major leagues. Before we move on to the next topic, something I wanted to comment on, I meant to do it at the top of the show. Our second show we discussed at the tail end about what umpire gear and new equipment is out that is best served to help protect umpires and catchers, both young, veteran, major league. One of the things we discussed was the Force 3 line of products. It's a mask that Tyler Flowers wears for the Braves. It's spring-loaded, really helps reduce concussions. There's a video of him taking a 90-plus mile-an-hour shot off the mask, and I'll try and get that put up on our social media sites. The founder and creator of Force 3 is a man named Jason Klein, umpired in the minors for a long time, was involved in a plane crash in New York the last few days. He is the sole survivor of that plane crash. So, a tragedy there, obviously, for all parties concerned, including, I believe it was three other people that lost their lives. But if you're a praying person, or I know it's obviously regular to say a prayer, but keep him in your thoughts. If you believe in that, send up a prayer for him. A guy that, by all accounts, from a lot of people that I know in the umpiring world, say is a great guy, and he has dedicated a lot of his life and time after getting out of the minor leagues umpiring to the protection of both umpires and catchers and the youth to help prevent the CTE and the issues that we see. So, from all of us, well, the two of us, I guess, here at Out of Left Field, Jason, please get well soon. And I know that Jim Kirk over at upattire.com, Jerry Davis at Jerry Davis Sports, they're all wishing their best to him. They all are big fans of his products. And if you guys ever want to take a look, check out force3progear.com to look at their stuff. Some really good stuff. Actually, Mike Winters, the home plate umpire in the All-Star game this past year, is the first big league umpire to wear one of those masks. And we actually saw him take a ricochet off of Salvi's glove right into the mask, and it was nothing. So it works. We're seeing it out there. It's growing.
Yeah, you hate to hear about stuff like that happen, man. And obviously, we keep him in our thoughts. It's terrible. It's terrible to hear about tragedies like that. What I wanted to say is I know we got a little off topic there when we started with the Hall of Fame stuff. I'd really like to hear what everybody thinks about this Hall of Fame class. I really don't want to get into the PED discussion again, though I will if you'd like to. But tell me what you think about Piazza and Griffey going into the Hall of Fame this year. Tweet us out at OOLeftField on Twitter. Email us ooleftfield@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook. Out of Left Field is the name of our page. If you want to go on there, tell us how you feel about this this Hall of Fame class, and if you could, go ahead and leave some personal words of encouragement for the guy who suffered just a terrible tragedy.
Yeah, for Jason. You guys can do that, and like I said, to go along with Chris there, if anything that you want to say to Jason, any good thoughts, I will pass along to some guys who are I know are personal friends of him, and I'll make sure that he gets that and knows that he's being thought of. So thank you, Chris, for that. I know that we would definitely want to get guys involved on our pages, but also for that, I appreciate it.
So to kind of try to move on and keep this thing rolling, we know Drew Pomeranz gets traded to Boston, comes out, has a start, doesn't do so great. That is definitely something for another show. I'd like to see him have another start against a team with good bats, see if he gets hit around like he does when he faces the Giants. He tends to do when he faces the Giants. But, you know, there are guys, I mean, trade deadline's coming up real quick, and there are guys on the trading block, and there are guys who there are teams in need right now. And
there's also a team called the New York Yankees who have rumoredly, wow, that was a crazy word, high five me, who have been rumored to possibly cut Alex Rodriguez, who we just talked about, and former Braves and Rangers first baseman and current Yankees first baseman Mark Teixeira. So let's open up the trade machine and the rumor machine with that one, man. I mean, that is the amount of money that I think he's owed. That's big news for me. I was surprised.
I'm watching Alex Rodriguez right now. As a matter of fact, the Yankees are playing the Giants, and you know, I haven't really been paying attention to him this year. I try not to pay attention to Alex Rodriguez, but the guy's hitting .210 right now. I mean, ouch. You know, for a guy like Alex Rodriguez to be hitting at or around 200 on the season is rough. And for as much money as they're paying him, I mean, maybe the Yankees are having a fire sale, and maybe that's what's going on. Maybe they see they're done, they need to rebuild, they're going to get rid of a bunch of old bad money, and getting rid of Alex Rodriguez is one way to do it. But, I mean, they owe that guy a ton of money.
The Yanks are one game over 500. They're 48-47. They're 7 games back. We've said it since, you know, our fourth or fifth show that the Red Sox, Orioles, and Blue Jays are pretty much going to be, you know, the race for the AL East. Probably one of the best races. I think probably the best race in the American League. I think for most people who look at A-Rod as just the villain of baseball, which is a mantle that he earned and he's stuck with owning. I think this is really kind of the final punctuation point on what has just ended up being a completely tarnished career. And not only that, but away from that side of it, to me it showed a lot of ignorance, and honestly, the strength of that word, it kind of is what I feel is the ignorance of the Yankees management staff. Why Brian Cashman wanted to extend Alex Rodriguez at the age that he was with another 6 or 7 10-year contract at, again, over $250 million was beyond me. At the age he was, the production, you know, it was declining. We were seeing it. We were hearing that he and Jeter, who were two of the best friends in baseball when they weren't playing together, were having a rift starting. And I think we can tell by the way Jeter acts both on and off the field that it wasn't Jeter's doing. I just don't see why. I don't think he gave them really the best chance to win. It seemed like it was a waste of money.
Right. I agree. I think that Alex Rodriguez was probably a designated hitter type player when he received that contract.
Which is your favorite thing ever in Major League Baseball.
Yeah. And you know how much I like the designated hitter. In the National League, he was done. In a league that doesn't have a designated hitter slot, he was done. He was definitely not the same infielder that he used to be, and he's definitely lost a step. And now that he's a designated hitter, he's kind of gotten fat. I mean, I don't want to be mean to the guy, but he's gaining a bunch of weight. He's not hitting well. He's not worth the money. And I don't want to get too far off topic, but let me ask you a question just real quick, and I know this is a curveball for you, but do you think that a salary cap of some sort could stop general managers from making terrible decisions like that down the road.
Yes, it would, and no, it won't happen. The MLBPA, no way in hell they would allow it.
I realize it's not going to happen because the players are in a place where they get to dictate. It's a seller's market in Major League Baseball, in that the players get to dictate their own wealth based on how well they play, and they don't have to worry about having to fit into some team's cap space.
Well, let's think about it. I mean, the NFL is what is worth $2 or $4 billion, if not more. I'm not. I don't know what's the entire NFL. $13 billion.
They have annual revenues of $13 billion. The National Football League is the highest revenue sports league in the world, including FIFA, bar none.
So Andrew Luck just signed a contract for, I believe it was over $100 million, and less than 50% of that number is guaranteed to him.
And in an NFL that's not capped in a similar way to how MLB is not capped, that guys like Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers are probably making $250 million over 5 or 6 years too. But
easily.
I think in a place like the NFL where you got guys who are only going to play, I mean, if you play 10 years in the NFL, you had a really long career. Halfbacks last 5 or 6 years. Linebackers last 3 or 4 years.
30 is old, is over the hill in the NFL, where in the NBA and Major League Baseball, that's getting into your prime years where you're swinging the bat the best, you're chasing down, defenders on the court the best, and then in the NFL you're done. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a crazy thing, and I think I think what we're seeing happen with the Yankees is very similar to what we saw Chip Carey discuss with us a couple of weeks ago with the Braves. Is they loaded up, and they have always tended to load up so much in the big leagues that their farm system is not normally that good. And to be fair, they have some pretty good prospects in the wings, which I think is why they're realizing that most of these veterans are on their way out. Brett Gardner is probably going to be gone. There's rumors about him. Tex is most likely going to be gone. A-Rod, if he finishes his contract, it's really not even on the team. I mean, and with someone who's had hip surgery, it's not easy to come back from. That's what he's dealing with.
Right.
Brian McCann has not been what we thought he was. And then they're going to go ahead and get rid of that bullpen, which it seems crazy to get rid of such a good back end. But when your starting rotation is so rough, it's why the Braves got rid of Kimbrel.
What's really crazy is that they could cut Alex Rodriguez at this point, and if nobody picks him up, they're going to pay him $22 million to sit on his couch.
It's the nature of the beast.
It's rough. They might pay him another $26 million to do it again next year.
Yeah, they tendered the offer. They're stuck with it. I don't feel bad for him at all.
No, I don't feel bad for him. Now, there's something that prevents me from feeling bad for a team like the Yankees, who have shown their ability to purchase championships in the past.
So let me ask you this, brother. Since we're in the AL East,
okay,
we're looking top down right now. The Red Sox are on a tear. They're 9-1 in their last 10. I mean, they're playing stupid good coming out of the break and ending the break and coming back into the second half of the season. Mm-hmm. They're a half game up on the Orioles. The Rays are the bottom. They're 17 games back. They're done. The big rumor that I have heard tossed around is that Evan Longoria could be being looked at going out west, which I'm not sure I would see him. I've heard the Dodgers mentioned, which just is kind of an odd move to me because Justin Turner is a solid third baseman. But their pitching staff are looking at breaking up. Jake Odorizzi, Chris Archer, who was a dominant A's last year. I believe he won the Cy Young last year. I'll have to double check that. I know he had a great year. Either him or Sale, I think, that won the Cy Young. But he may be going, which his first innings have been just horrible. I don't know what the heck is going on, but he has not been able to get out of the majority of first innings of his starts unscathed, and there hasn't been enough offense behind him. So what do you see with Jake Odorizzi, Matt Moore, who I think is probably the best starter right now the Rays have, and Chris Archer? Where do you think they would fit in, with teams that they're needing, as we've discussed multiple times, starting pitching help?
Well, I'll tell you who's looking at him for sure. The Rangers are looking for pitchers. These guys, the Rangers are a great team. They have a lot of really good pieces, but they are looking for starting pitchers, and they are looking for bullpen help. Jake Odorizzi is a guy that they're looking at. Chris Archer is a guy that they're looking at. Sonny Gray is a guy that they're looking at. And, of course, Chris Sale from the Sox, who I think are also having a fire sale at this point.
And I was
are all being looked at.
Dallas Keuchel won the AL Cy Young. It was Keuchel that won it last year. My fault.
Right. But yeah, I think that the Rangers are a good place to look for guys to land. And the Pirates, man, the Pirates are looking at Chris Archer hard because, I mean, the Pirates see an opening, I think, in the wild card race, and if they can pick up, or not just in the wild card race, but in the NL East at this point. And I think that if they can pick up
NL Central,
right? Sorry, if they can pick up a guy like Chris Archer, they might be able to make a late run, at least for the wild card.
Well, yeah, definitely. I'd be really hard pressed to think the Cubs are going to drop the division. And I'm with you. I mean, the Pirates. And it's tough. Clint Hurl's from out here where I live. Actually, one of the high schools that I umpire at, their field actually that's where he started. Their field is named for him. The one that has me really is they can't ever get over the hump. I don't know if they have enough right now. I mean, they're going to make a move. They're already pushing to try and get up on the Cardinals, because the Cardinals right now are struggling with the fact that they just lost Matt Carpenter right before the All-Star break. But man, I just don't know if the Pirates have enough pieces, especially with the way that they've been hitting early in the year. I get that the Cubs have run away with it, but that's going to be rough, man. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting. About the Marlins, though, as you mentioned, the wild card. I mean, we know they have Jose Fernandez, but would another starting pitcher there to kind of help tighten everything up there, would that not be helpful? I mean, right now they're crazily sitting in the second wild card, and they're only one game back of the Dodgers, who I think we agree are probably going to slip because Kershaw isn't there.
I think the Dodgers are definitely going to slip. I don't think that, personally, unless the Dodgers dump some money and go after a Chris Sale to replace Clayton Kershaw, I think the Dodgers miss the playoffs this year completely. If Kershaw doesn't come back at all, which it looks like now that he's not, I think the Dodgers miss the playoffs. And we spoke briefly about possible trade rumors involving the Dodgers and looking at getting rid of guys. And one of the names that came up was Yasiel Puig, who's been somewhat inconsistent, hasn't really played like he did his rookie year. To be fair, he's been a lightning rod there for a while. He was loved the first couple of weeks, but I mean, he and automatically began to butt heads very quickly. Well, he's got a big mouth, and he has a bad attitude. And we've seen ball players like him before who have a big mouth and a bad attitude, and they bounce around. They bounce around the league, and guys don't like him. Guys don't get along with him. Doesn't change the fact that he's a good player. I think Yasiel Puig is a great player. He has a cannon for an arm, and when he's hitting. Yes. But what are you going to get for Yasiel Puig the way he's playing right now? You're going to get prospects for Yasiel Puig. Getting rid of Puig at this point just sinks the Dodgers a little bit deeper this season. And
so do you think it's better for them to hold on to Puig maybe one or two more seasons, or at least not to the point where he's ready to be a free agent and you get nothing, but where he has substantiated himself enough as something worth a trade if the inconsistencies are still there, and if we're seeing the base running issues, which really plagued him when he first came up? Is that where you think a move for him might be better warranted, a better fit at least?
Possibly. I mean, unless you can get a Jay Bruce or Josh Reddick or
I don't even know if I'd trade Reddick for him at this point. Reddick's getting older. I think he's over age 30, and Puig is young, man. I have a hard time.
Puig is young, but Reddick's more consistent than Puig is. And Reddick's got a cannon for an arm too. Let's not forget that Reddick can throw people out from deep in right field, just like Yasiel Puig can. I've seen him do it. Neither of them have the sort of highlights that guys like Yoenis Cespedes has, throwing guys away from 400 feet. But still, at this point, right now, at this point in the season, Josh Reddick is a better player than Yasiel Puig. I don't know if that extrapolates out into next season at all. I don't know if that extrapolates out into 2 or 3 seasons. But if you're in a position like where the Dodgers are, where you're leading the wild card by 1 game, and you have an opportunity to get a guy on rental who is more consistent and a better player than the guy you have in place, and you know you're going to lose a strong pitcher, maybe you do that. And maybe you dump Yasiel Puig, who's only making $5.5 million this year. Reddick's only making $7. So it's a pretty even trade. You're not going to get a guy like Ryan Braun because it doesn't make sense to either team, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. Milwaukee would have to eat a ton of money. And as you mentioned, Josh Reddick,
right?
He's actually only 29. I didn't know he and I were born only 6 days apart, so he's not over age 30. He came up with Boston. The things I'm seeing a lot of is that the Cubs are looking at him as an extra outfielder, which I can see because we've kind of seen him doing outfield by committee. Chris Bryant played left field a couple of days ago. So I think he'd be a nice fit there. Theo Epstein drafted him when he was with Boston still. So obviously Theo knows him. He knows his skill set. He knows that he can fit him in, which if the Cubs are going hard for Josh Reddick, that had better scare the hell out of the rest of the NL Central, because if Theo we already know he knows players, but if he's going after someone he drafted at the previous team who is now seeing the explosion of growth that he had when he went to Oakland, you better strap your boots up and get ready for a very long second half playing the Cubbies.
Well, and let's not forget who else Theo Epstein wants. Andrew Miller from the Yankees, who for the first time in a long time, the Yankees are sellers this year. And if Theo Epstein goes after Andrew Miller, he's probably going to have to put Kyle Schwarber up for him. No, probably. We know that the Yankees want Schwarber back.
Yeah.
But I think that if the Cubbies could pick up a Josh Reddick, who's a surefire outfielder,
he's going to be expendable.
Right. Schwarber's going to be expendable, and you can pick up a guy like Miller, and you're right. It's going to be a long road to hoe in the NL Central.
I love that. I can see it. I think that makes perfect sense. I really do. I mean, because you and I have talked about the fact that really what the Cubs need is to shore up that bullpen with a lefty arm, and that's what they're going to get. My only worry is that if you look at Andrew Miller's career numbers compared to his season numbers, his career numbers are nowhere near what he's been doing. This has been a absolutely insanely good year for him. So I just want to know, is that going to continue? Because what you don't want to do is get rid of a big player like Schwarber, and then you get Miller, then, he just gutted on us. So
that's true. No, and that's one of those things that, you never know. If a guy is going to be able to not only continue playing the way he's playing, even where he is, but if he's going to go somewhere else and continue to play that way. And especially he's going to have to make that switch, right? He's going to have to make that big switch that American League pitchers are always going to have to make, where now all of a sudden he's going to be expected to hit too.
Well, Andrew Miller, thankfully, is a reliever, so we won't see him in that regard. My thing would be, how good is he at playing the outfield? Because we've seen Joe Madden already try and do that. So are we going to see him? Are we going to see him shagging fly balls? In batting practice.
Well,
one last trade before we get ready to transition to our last topic of the day, or two players really. I don't think there's any doubt, and I said this when we started going over our picks, was that if James Shields did not really help that Chicago White Sox rotation with the way they were playing, that I was done with them, and I am done. They've done nothing before the All-Star break, nothing after. They started off red hot, and I mean they have fizzled out in a light that we have not seen in a long, long time. I
they're
can't
like
tell
a bad
you what
firework.
happened. It really is. I mean, I don't get it. I think we're going to see Todd Frazier go. He's in the last year of his contract. Melky Cabrera is. Obviously, we know the steroid issues. He's an older player. But the big boys, the big names, are Chris Sale and Jose Quintana, and both are under contract until 2017 and 2018, respectively. And both contracts are relatively team-friendly. So I've told you this. I don't know how much the Dodgers are willing to sell, but lefty arms are a commodity, yes?
Absolutely.
Could you imagine having Clayton Kershaw and Chris Sale 1-2?
I can. I can imagine it.
The Dodgers have a chance at making the playoffs. It's the only way they have a chance at making the playoffs this year if they get Sale.
I think it's a frightening prospect. I don't think that the Dodgers is where Sale is going to end up if he ends up anywhere other than staying with the White Sox. I just don't see the Dodgers being willing to dump all of that they are going to need to be able to dump to get Chris Sale.
Just two names come to mind to me with that trade. It's Yasiel Puig, who I could deal with, but Corey Seager. And I don't see a Dodgers team that, if they don't make the playoffs this year, are sure as hell going to be rivaling your Giants again next year for that NL West title. You don't get rid of Corey Seager.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think that to pick up a guy like Chris Sale, you're going to need more than a Corey Seager or even a Yasiel Puig, who doesn't really fit into the White Sox overall needs. Definitely not their overall style of play. I think that for Chris Sale to come to the National League, it's going to take a lot. I think that if Chris Sale goes anywhere, he goes to the Rangers. I think the Rangers have the best opportunity to get him. They can give up guys, and let's not forget that they have one of the strongest farm teams in the league, and a guy like Joey Gallo makes the pot really, really sweet when you're talking about the number 7 overall prospect in the league. But the big name I want to talk about before we move on is Aroldis Chapman. Aroldis Chapman, we know, now holds the record and has not only holds it but has matched it again at 105 miles an hour. And the Yankees again are having a fire sale, and there's a lot of people looking at Aroldis Chapman right now. But nobody is looking at him like the Nationals are looking at him. The Nationals are all in on Aroldis Chapman, and I think that if Chapman goes anywhere, and it's not Washington, then the only other person I could see who could make the kind of trade that the Yankees are going to want for Aroldis Chapman are Brian Sabean and the Giants, man. And they could use him, to be honest. I don't like to bring it up, but our closer did have a balk off a couple of days ago, and that was hard to watch.
He caught his cleat in the mound. We saw CC Sabathia do the same thing. And before I get into your point, I want to ask you one follow-up to the point you just made. If the Yankees sell off and Aroldis Chapman comes to the Nationals. Now, I believe this is the final year of his contract. If they're able to keep him, does Bryce Harper consider staying with the Nationals instead of going to New York? Because I think we all see the writing on the wall that his personality would fit in New York. I think it's what he wants. He wants the bright lights. But if you have a team like what they have, I don't think Jason Worth is there very longer. I think Ryan Zimmerman's probably on the way out. So you'll need a couple of extra pieces around him. But you've got the starting lineup, the starting pitching. You'll have a bullpen there. What do you do with Papelbon? I don't know. But if they can, you have Daniel Murphy. If you can add maybe one more bat to protect him, does he stay in Washington?
Well, if you got, we talked about Papelbon, and I don't know where he goes either. That's a tough question. As far as what do you do with him? The guy's he's getting beat up.
He's having a great year, but he's always been a closer, even in Boston and Philly. So he's not gonna turn into a setup guy. That's for sure. Neither one of them can.
If you take Papelbon, if you pick up Aroldis Chapman, you pick up Aroldis Chapman to throw 7 or 8 really hard pitches. I think anybody who's looking at Aroldis Chapman knows that. They want Aroldis Chapman to come in for 1 inning and just throw as hard as he can.
With some command, preferably, because that 105-mile-an-hour pitch
and
was
maybe
at the toes of the hitter, not
maybe
as catching slow.
Maybe Mike Maddox can help him with that control. Who knows? Mike Maddox is the pitching coach in Washington.
Greg's brother, by the way, Hall of Famer from, I believe, last year?
I believe so. But
2 years ago, I'm sorry. Greg Biggio, Johnson, and Pedro were last year. 2 years ago, when Maddox and Glavine and Bobby Cox went in.
Possibly Mike Maddox could bring that control. Now, Aroldis Chapman's last 105-mile-an-hour pitch was right down Broadway, and he destroyed a bat with it. He cut a bat in half with it. Turned it into a bloop infield, just a little dribbler. Almost hit the guy out, actually, because the bat almost hit the first baseman. But he sawed a guy off with that last 105-mile-an-hour pitch he threw. But I don't think that means he's getting any more control. I think that means he happened to hit a spot with that one.
I agree. And it's funny, I've talked to a couple of guys. I also had some friends who've umpired international or minor league baseball and some independent league ball. And they say that when that ball, and they've seen guys ramp it up into triples, and that ball misses, it whistles. Not just that sound, but it actually whistles going by your head.
Oh, yeah.
So, 100 miles an hour is heat. And he needs to harness it. And you know what? Even if you drop down to 103 miles an hour, that's still relatively quick.
Yeah. Even if you drop down to 98 miles an hour with a little movement, could you imagine how dangerous that could be?
If he did that, he could go down as one of the best closers of all time. I will never, ever say anybody could go down as the best closer of all time until I see them, for a career, do better than Mariano Rivera or oh, good Lord, help me out, Brattle. Trevor Hoffman. I think those are probably the 2 best closers of all time. Dennis Eckersley was, I think.
Yeah, I think Eck is a name. I think Eck's a name you have to put on that list. He's a 300-plus save guy.
Yeah, obviously we're not going to end up rating guys, but I think if Chapman was able to put movement, it would be
in the high 90s. On a high 90s, say a high 90s two-seamer.
Yep.
It'd be disgusting. But Aroldis Chapman is a guy who's on the trade block right now, and it'll be interesting to see if he goes where he goes. But I think we've probably run a little bit over time on the trade thing.
And to be fair, we've got 9 more days the trade deadline anyway. So
yeah, and
August 1st is going to be our deadline.
Right. We'll definitely come back to it because we're going to want to discuss what happens, where people go, and really in the middle of August is when we're probably going to want to talk about if any of these trades are helping these teams at all.
And as you and I both agreed, rather, that we reserve the right to kind of adjust our postseason picks for the trade deadline to see if the teams that we thought would make the playoff push, if they got help, actually get that help. So you'll also be getting to hear our final predictions, and then who was right, who was wrong, and I don't know if we make a wager or what we're going to do. So I want to kind of transition into our final topic, if you don't mind.
Joe Torre.
Yeah, this one obviously I read it. It kind of it made my eyes open a little bit because obviously it's kind of in the wheelhouse, if you will. A week ago today, last Friday, Joe Torre sent out a widely publicized memo to all managers, assistant general managers, and GMs to not use replay to argue the strike zone. We already saw Mike Rizzo, the Nats GM, get into a heated discussion with Jim Joyce over a replay call of Jason Worth's. He failed to adhere to the slide rule, which that's another discussion for a different day. But Jason Worth did one of the most textbook slides to break up a double play that you'd ever see that wasn't malicious and still didn't meet the rule. So different thing. Here's a quote from the memo that Joe Torre sent. Quote, "This highly inappropriate conduct is detrimental to the game and must stop immediately," end quote. So almost every fan – go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry. No, go ahead, please.
My question is, though, is this highly detrimental conduct that he's talking about, is it arguing balls and strikes, or is it calling down to your guys, asking him if it was a strike, and then going out and arguing it?
Yes, to all the above. Well, not arguing. Arguing balls and strikes is still immediately ejectable, but it's the fact that they're using replay to bolster their argument.
Right.
Right. I mean, almost every fan of the game knows.
Is Joe Torre telling people not to argue balls and strikes?
Well, that rule's already in place. That's not going to stop a manager from doing that.
I realize, and it didn't stop Joe Torre either. Let's not forget that Joe Torre is one of the most ejected managers in baseball history.
Granted, yes.
So it kind of sounds like Joe Torre telling managers that they argue too much or that they're getting ejected too much.
It's like Barry Bonds saying, "Don't use steroids."
Yeah, it's a little hypocritical. I understand where he's coming from, saying don't look at a replay and then go out there and tell the umpire he got it wrong. Not only is it disrespectful, I mean, it's incredibly disrespectful. Like we discussed on the show before, umpires are right in high 90% of the time, 97, 98% of the time. So to go out there and tell an umpire he's getting it wrong, or, hey, according to the replay, you're missing low consistently, I think, you should get ejected for that because that's ridiculous. But don't tell managers not to argue calls.
Well, and they're not. I mean, balls and strikes are an immediate ejection anyway. They're not reviewable. And another quote: "On-field personnel in the dugout may not discuss any issue with individuals in their video review room using the dugout phone, other than whether to challenge a play subject to a video replay review." As I'm sure the majority of our listeners know, there is a phone in the dugout that is directly linked to the replay review room that says, yes, challenge it, no, don't challenge it. And again, guys, if you are listening to us for the first time or you just haven't had a chance to follow us yet, we are on social media. You can get us, just search us on Facebook, Out of Left Field. Really simple. On Twitter, we are at OOLeftField, and you can also email us at ooleftfield@gmail.com. The picture on Twitter and Facebook is the same, so you'll know it's us. I'm the handsome guy in the hat, and Chris is the ugly guy in the – what are you wearing? I think you're in your uniform there, so I guess not totally ugly if I had to be nice.
Huh. Not just my uniform, my dress uniform, but thank you.
Mike Matheny jumped in kind of on your point, and he said, quote, "Joe's the boss, so I guess we'd better cool it. There's just some days you can't stand over there and not say something. They're always making additions, and I get speeding the game up, and sometimes that sort of thing slows it down. So it'll take a little while to walk through that and see exactly how to play it. But you can't take the emotion out of the game. Joe knows that as well as everybody, but I understand where he's coming from," end quote. And this isn't about speeding up the game. It's about understanding that balls and strikes is a pure judgment call. Yes, there's a defined zone, but it's still a judgment call. So unless they're going to put in an electronic system, which I do not agree with, because I'm sorry, there is just something about the pitcher's pitch or a hitter's pitch or getting that outside corner when he's been hitting it all night. If I see Clayton Kershaw or say Julio Teheran is on or Chris Sale, and you know what, that ball is just off the black, he's probably going to get that call. So, it's just part of the game. I don't want to see everything go to this replay electronic crap.
Right.
And I believe managers have done this. I mean,
Speak of the devil, there's a replay going on in the Yankees-Giants game right now.
Really?
Yeah. Trying to see if somebody's fingers brushed home plate.
See, and that's the other thing with review and replay we can get into our time. It wasn't designed for these small little calls.
Well, this is a scoring play, so I mean, that's not a little call.
Could be. Don't question me, Furry.
Yeah.
So let's be honest. All right, guys like Bryce Harper have an excellent feel for the zone. Okay, we see him get pissed off a lot, and I don't like that part of his game. But the thing with him getting ticked off is when he does, a lot of times at the plate, he generally sees the ball very well. We saw him get dumped last year. Jerry Meals called the pitch prior a ball, and the next one went a little bit farther out, and it was a strike 3, and he got tossed in extra innings. But and I know it's hard to believe, Battle, because I'm always right with stuff, but I've actually been barked at by hitters and coaches, and sometimes I've actually deserved it. And there's nothing wrong with chirping. Nothing. I mean, it's you're trying to get that close call to go the way of your player. You know, if I'm a little bit low, or if I know I missed, and I hear, like, okay, yeah, and I'll take it. Now, if it gets excessive, you knock it off. The thing you see a lot of umpires do is they kind of get that short fuse when they know they were wrong. Instead of, okay, yeah, I missed it, and then, all right, I got you, and knock it off. And sometimes managers don't knock it off, and away they go. But
right.
breaking news, umpires aren't perfect, but they are right a whole hell of a lot more than they're wrong.
And, to that point, I was watching a game yesterday, man. Ryan Braun was playing. Ryan Braun is another guy who chirps at umpires when he feels like his zone is being encroached on, or the size of his zone is being enlarged. And twice yesterday, consecutive pitches, a low outside cutter and then a low inside slider. Ryan Braun got rung up on strike 2 on the outside cutter, strike 3 on that inside pitch. Both were low in the zone. Both were on the corners. And Jerry Davis rung him up, looking, and Ryan Braun tripped at him after both of those pitches. Jerry Davis told him to go to the dugout, and he did. But he wasn't happy. So I'm watching on MLB Network, and of course MLB Network, when you get that sort of thing from a Ryan Braun or a Bryce Harper, they look at it. And so they looked at both of those pitches, and both of those pitches were just above the hollow of the knee, and both of them were kissing the black. And he was right. Jerry Davis was dead on with both of those strikes. So obviously the umpires know what they're doing, especially a guy like Jerry Davis.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jerry's one of the most storied umpires. He holds the record for most postseason games worked. And it's something I want to bring up, and of all people I have to bring up is Buster Posey, but it's because I have video proof of it. I discussed that MLB Network show, The Third Team, which they've done 2 out of the last 4 World Series.
Mm-hmm.
And in Game 7 of the series against Kansas City, where they won in 14, Jeff Nelson has the dish. Is behind the plate, for those of you not familiar with the vernacular. I assume most of you guys are. But he gets called for strike three looking. And he kind of throws his head back, and he leans into Jeff Nelson, and he says, "That pitch is down and in, isn't it?" He said, "As long as I get that one, I'm okay with it." And Jeff said, "I got it on the corner." Buster said, "Okay," and he walked off. So we know guys know how – I mean, we've seen him lean in and talk to the umpire, "Hey, where was it?" How many times do you see a guy swinging a pitch, then look back and talk, and you wonder, what's he chirping for? What he's asking him is a simple question: was that a strike? Not to be a sarcastic jerk of, I swung, was that it? But hey, was that in the zone? Because they want to adjust to the pitcher.
Right.
And that's fine. I mean, so we know guys can do it, and there's a beauty in the way that it's done. So
well,
I get what Joe Torre's going for here. I just said it. Does it mean much on paper? No. It's probably not worth what the paper it's printed on, but it's at least out there. Not telling guys to stop doing it, but hey, you guys need to knock it off.
Right. And there's a fine line between the way that even on the same team, a guy like Buster Posey does it, and the way Madison Bumgarner does it. If Bumgarner gets a called strike that he doesn't like, he'll look at the umpire and say, you better call that for me. When I throw that pitch, you better call that as a strike for me. And we saw him getting into a staring contest with Joe West on the hill one night because he didn't get a call and he just stared. And West, who was known for a quick hook, just stared back and then they moved on. Those staring contests lasted that entire series. When West was working down the left field line, they at third base they were staring at each other, and Bumgarner was in the dugout, and they were having staring contests.
And as we close that game, actually, when he was working third the game after, Jimmy Rollins slid head first into third base and asked for time. Then stood up and just stared at Joe West, started laughing. About 5 seconds, started grinning. So
hilarious.
There's always some fun. So, man, great show. A little bit longer. We went about an hour 20, but a lot of stuff to get into after the All-Star break. A lot more I think we were expecting out of the All-Star break. But first weekend, man, a lot of good stuff coming in, and I think we're going to have a lot more coming up in the next few weeks with the trade deadline and guys moving. So,
well, it's good to
Battle, you got anything else?
Playing baseball again. It's good to be back playing baseball again. I'm glad we're back in the swing of things. It's going to be interesting to see how teams play out in the second half, and I really can't wait to see how the trades, not just the main trade deadline, but also after the waivers, how everything plays out. And I mean, we're less than 80 games out, guys, from October. So,
and I'll leave with a tease for next week. Yan Gomes for the Cleveland Indians goes down with a hurt shoulder. Big rumor is now Jonathan Lucroy might be heading to Cleveland. We will discuss that next week with plenty more trade rumors and the crazy things in baseball that seem to be coming straight out of left field. Thanks, guys. We will see you all next week.